Our triggers are the best way to know when we're out of balance. There is an emotional root cause to every single illness and disease in the body. I've started to think like, well, I could have prevented so much suffering in my life. And that is untrue. Welcome back to Empowering From Within. I'm so happy to have you here. Today, I am going to try and distill decades of experience and research and knowledge and truly lived, embodied experience into half an hour podcast about how to heal the physical body and what's going on in the physical body from what I have learned across all my interactions with the Western medical system, and then now in the last several years doing so much study and training and courses on how to truly heal at the deepest level. And obviously, when I was 18, I had such a severe illness. I was as close to death as any human could possibly be. I was in intensive care for 5 weeks on all the machines, not expected to live. And my main takeaway from that experience was the power and mighty, indefatigable, inextinguishable power of the human spirit, and how our spirit and soul is truly the most incredible, extraordinary asset that we all possess. And that it was my soul and my spirit and my energy that got me through that illness, that truly saved my life. That was the only thing that could never be touched or taken away. All my studies and my home and my health and abilities and senses were all taken, but my spirit and soul and my essence could not be harmed or touched or extinguished, no matter how intensely desperate and devastating the illness was. My soul was untouchable. And I was able to move through life with that knowing, having experienced it, and rebuild my life because of my soul and my energy into a physical reality that nobody in that hospital could imagine. No doctors, no nurses, no one had any reassurance or comfort for me that I would be able to rebuild my life. But I just knew in my heart and in my soul that I could, and I could do it independently with as much spunk and fun as possible. So that's what I did. And I found a lot of comfort and certainty in the Western medical system, because in some respects it truly was life-saving. It held me together on machines and breathed on my behalf and fed me, and all the medical interventions truly did keep me alive. And I didn't have a lot of health issues after that experience until my 30s, when I lost my eye. Now, I've done a podcast episode on that being challenges, upgrades, and going through the process of having 21 reconstructive surgeries. Now, what I didn't touch on was where I got to with how to heal physical illness and disease in the body through that experience, because I knew something deeper was going on than my cells just not growing together. I also looked back at the last 20 years and saw that despite the fact that I had been in ophthalmologist's office and specialist office and eye doctor's offices regularly for 20 years, I had got to the point where now I was having my eye removed and my eyes were getting worse. And I couldn't understand how these quote unquote experts had, I'd placed all my faith in them, and this is where it ended up, with having my eye removed and the surgery truly not working. And I just knew there was a deeper level of healing that I needed to attain. And so I read every single book possible on healing and remission and spontaneous recoveries. I undertook courses in healer training, and I went down the rabbit holes of functional medicine, lifestyle, diet, all the things. And what I got to, where I found my quest was complete, was when I discovered that there is an emotional root cause to every single illness and disease in the body. Just as I believe deeply that our external reality is a reflection of our internal world, and as within, so without, and our energy is literally casting instructions out into reality to shape the matter and people around us based on our own self-image and self-love and the way that we think and believe and behave and our subconscious programs, I also believe that we are handing out instructions to our body to say, this is how I treat myself, this is how I see myself. And our body is constantly talking to us and trying to explain the imbalances that we're having. We've talked before about the scale of consciousness, and everything in our physical reality is all made up of energy and light. And the highest expression of light is God. And science would explain God as the most high frequency, high vibrational expression of light and energy. And as you get further down the consciousness scale, it becomes heavy, dense, dark matter. And if you look at an MRI or an X-ray, the disease and illness shows up as dark spots and dark matter. It is an absence of light in the physical that we're scanning for. And there's that famous MRI study where they found ovarian cancer within the MRI scan energetically, but it was not in the physical bodies. But later down the track, it manifested physically. And we already know the law that everything exists first energetically before it exists physically. And so illnesses and disease and even injuries and pimples and hair loss and whatever it is that you're going through, wrinkles, infertility, back pain, all of it begins energetically and begins with an emotional root cause. And it is our literal spirit and soul being out of balance and out of that high frequency understanding of life, that there is positive and negative in everything, and that perspective of unconditional love. It is usually an emotional imbalance that is not very flattering to us as humans, and it is covered in anger or shame or something that we don't really want to admit or put light towards, and so we shove it down and it gets stored in our tissues. There's that famous book, The Body Keeps the Score. It's a Harvard trauma professor who clinically proves that trauma is stored within our body and emotional imbalances are stored within our body. Even modern medicine will admit that stress is a contributing factor to illness, and emotional imbalances contribute to disease and illness and being run down, and that lifestyle and diet and exercise and how we treat ourselves are all contributing factors to the disease or illness that might show up in our bodies down the track. So if you think of the scale of consciousness, if you are a high frequency soul and you are operating at a frequency that is higher than Western medicine is not going to work for you. You are going to need to find modalities and treatments and, tinctures or functional doctors or Eastern medicine or modalities or approaches or therapies that are at a higher consciousness and a higher frequency than modern Western medicine, because that is operating at a lower frequency. Now, someone at a lower frequency might go into the doctor and find that the advice of the doctor raises their frequency and they are able to create more light and balance in their lives through the medical system. But often, people who are operating at a high consciousness level, the mainstream stuff does not work for them. And it is by design, so that we can go on our little soul's quest to find the most high frequency information possible, so that we can keep elevating and raising our consciousness and expanding, because nothing in our lives or our souls should be limiting. Our self-image should be the most expansive, unlimited concept possible, so that we can achieve all the things in our life that we need to achieve. And if we are carrying around and dragging around limited concepts of ourselves, our soul feels restricted and is going to express that and talk to us through our body. We know that, subconscious programs become so ingrained and we get on these autopilot approaches and ways of seeing the world. Someone who may have been abandoned as a child by a parent suddenly starts seeing the world through that lens. They don't have the perspective as a child to see the limitation in the parent that abandoned them. And so they internalize and make that mean something about them. And then they are constantly operating under this negative limiting belief that there is something not right with them, that they are not good enough, that they are a burden or not lovable or whatever it might be that person made that abandoning parent mean about them. And then they carry that around and it grows and grows and grows in our energy until it shows up later in life as an autoimmune disease where we're literally, our cells are attacking our own body. So getting to the emotional root cause is the most empowering possible thing you can do in any disease and illness. I'm sure if everyone listening to this thinks back to their last illness or disease or injury and looks around their life at what was happening in the weeks or months leading up to that, flare up or flu or headache or whatever, you will see that there was a level of stress and imbalance going on that was brewing before it spilled over into the physical and you became unwell. Headaches, I'm going to go through some illnesses and ailments and what the typical emotional root causes are. But every single human is going to make life circumstances mean something different about them than someone else would. It's very, very particular to our own experiences and mental processes and beliefs and attitudes, and also the parents that we grew up with and their limiting beliefs and their mental processes. Because when we're little kids, we are like sponges and we just are hanging out in someone else's electromagnetic field, picking up their limitations and being very influenced by the way they see the world and what they tell us to be true. And we tend to then adopt that as our own way of thinking through mirror neurons and just repetition. And you can imagine if you tell a child 100 times, for 10 years, over and over again, every time you drive them to school that the sky is falling, well, that kid's going to grow up thinking the sky literally could fall. And as a parent, this is shows the level of impact that we have on our kids, and it puts a huge responsibility on us. But it should be empowering because your ego might be triggered hearing this, because our ego's number one job is to keep us, it doesn't want to be fired. It doesn't like being blamed for things. We never want to feel like we've made a preventable mistake. That's been one of the hardest things that I have learned through uncovering all this high frequency information, is that, I've started to think like, well, I could have prevented so much suffering in my life. And that is untrue, because if we go back to that fundamental law of balance, that everything is equally positive and negative. If I hadn't have gone through all the health experience that I had been through and all the suffering and pain and, difficulty, there's no way I would have been motivated to find this information. And the skills and perspectives that I have in my life from going through everything that I've been through are some of the most valuable things that I own today. And so I believe that our souls and our higher selves know when we're going to find this information in life, and they don't give us the guidebook until we are meant to have it. So don't start beating yourself up that there are things you could have prevented by having better emotional balance, because it's not true. You're getting this information at the right time. Everything is in perfect balance. And I also believe that as souls, we choose who our parents are. I chose my parents for the exact lessons they were going to give me. Our kids have chosen us for the lessons that we are going to give them, and for even the difficulties that we are going to face with them around. And they know that they're getting skills and knowledge and consciousness by choosing us as parents. And so I learned this information after my children were 7, and from 0 to 7, our kids are usually very, very permeable, and they are acting out our electromagnetic field, and they are acting out our imbalances. And then from 7 onwards, they tend to then adopt the programs as if they're their own. But having created the neural pathways that they might be operating under, we can also uncreate them, and we can repeat new, more unlimited, expansive, empowering beliefs for them. And we can cultivate and keep reflecting back to them the self-worth that they deserve. So, it's kind of like the analogy of walking into the forest. And the further you walk into the forest with a negative belief, you also have to walk back out the same way and do it sort of the same amount of time. So often, beliefs or illnesses have been brewing and cultivating in our energy for years. I'm sure that some of my illnesses were brewing for years. I was in an imbalanced state, and my soul and view on life was completely imbalanced, and I was shoving down every single negative, angry, scary thought, and I was sitting in it alone for years and years and years. And then it tipped over and spilled into the physical. And the beauty of knowing this information now is that when we see our kids expressing a limiting self-concept or belief, we can undo it and we can start to program something more expansive in them. So do not be triggered, do not be stressed. Anything that has gone down that you are not happy with in your emotional mastery and balance to this point is all perfect. And we are totally imbalanced, but now we have more knowledge and information to have updated beliefs and updated tools to shift back into balance. So some of the common diseases and illnesses and their emotional root causes. Well, headaches are usually beating yourself up and being really, really hard on yourself, often in the mental area of life. Migraines are like an extreme form of that. Cuts and bruises are, again, an expression of punishing yourself and beating yourself up. I often beat myself up when I feel like I'm not doing enough. I'm the queen of beating myself up. I will leave any conversation, any speech, any work gig, any interaction with my family, and I will nitpick myself and pick apart all the things that I shouldn't have said or done or whatever. I'll, write the perfect 10,000 word essay and there'll be one typo and that's all I'll focus on. So I am very familiar with the beating oneself up method of living, and I discount all the positives and all the things that I did do well and only focus on the negatives. So that's been something that I've really had to flip on its head and and it feels awkward because I was taught to be the most humble, modest person in the entire world growing up as a child and never, sing your own praises. But it's antithetical to my core self-image. If I'm constantly beating myself up, I'm never going to reach my potential. I'm never going to have the confidence to actually put myself out there in career and relationships and family and all the areas of life and financial. I'm never going to see my own value and have that reflected back to me in financial. So it's actually not cool to diminish your own talents and the things you did well. So that's headaches, cuts and bruises. Digestion issues and tummy issues are often an inability to stomach something from the past or process difficult emotions and upsetting things from the past. Cancer is often deep-seated resentment and anger, which is why some of the loveliest people in the whole entire world get cancer, because they are not expressing their anger. They're too nice to express their anger. And often, I've also been down the path of German New Medicine as a modality, and I think it has some good information, but it's a bit limited in how it translates every physical ailment. I think it's more individually dependent. But one of the things that German New Medicine taught me was that often the things that we're shoving down and repressing and get stored in our body as an imbalance are things that aren't very flattering to us and we don't really want to admit to, like that we're really angry and full of rage, or that we are ashamed, or that we are embarrassed, or whatever it is. It's something that we don't want to consciously look at. So we shove it in the back of our shadow and subconscious, and then we drag it around with us and we sit in it alone, which is, like putting something in a petri dish just to proliferate. The best thing you can do is find a mentor or a parent or a friend or someone that you feel safe with to express the most unflattering things about you and shed light on them and be helped to put them back into balance. Because it's hard to do it for ourselves when we grow up, in the families that we grow up in and the schools that we go to. We are taught to hide all these parts of ourselves, but the truth is that we are all everything. Like, we all have positive and negative qualities. We are all ignorant as much as we are smart. We're all rude as much as we are warm. We all possess it all. So there is no part of us that is unlovable, but we are conditioned and programmed to shove down certain things about us, and then we get out of balance and we create illness and disease in the body. Every single illness and disease starts with an emotional imbalance and it has an emotional root cause. Lower back pain is often a financial, foundational support issue. If you're experiencing a lot of lower back pain, notice when you experience it, what you were doing or what you were just thinking about. And often that's a clue. And our body is literally very detailed in how it expresses and talks. You know, a sore throat is often the unexpressed anger or unexpressed creativity. And it's like swallowing that anger or that creative force, and it shows up in the part of the body where we were wanting to express it. Skin issues are often control, and rashes and things like that are feeling very out of control or wanting to be seen a certain way and not being able to control that. Same with pimples and acne on the face. Is like our face is often about how we're perceived by others, and pimples are often a sign of anger at how we're being seen. Hair loss is sometimes a lack of intuition, like being connected to your intuition. Legs, like I often get severe pain in my legs inside my prostheses, and the way that you talk about your illnesses is often a great clue into what they're trying to tell you and where your imbalance is, because it often feels like, if I was to describe it, it feels like someone's literally kicking me in the shin. As I have just confessed, I'm the queen of beating myself up and kicking myself. And so that expresses through pain in the physical body if I'm doing it subconsciously. And it is like our body is literally trying to get our attention to get us back into balance and say, hey, you are kicking yourself over and over again subconsciously, and you have this belief that you should constantly be regretting and beating yourself up for something. That is not true. Neck pain is often not seeing both sides of something. Joints are often being inflexible or rigid or stubborn. So all the parts of the body are trying to tell you a story of where your imbalance is. And once you can shift it and get back into balance and get back into that unconditionally loving perspective, and it might take a few reps, because you've got a lot of reps to get yourself to the point of having a physical illness or injury to be so out of balance. So it's going to take that walking back out of the forest analogy to get back into balance. And, you know, if you think about animals don't have this kind of constant illnesses that humans have, because they don't have the subconscious memory neural pathway thing going on that we do. And when they go through something stressful, I see it in my dog a million times. They literally just shake it out and shake it off, get back into balance, and they're fine. Whereas as humans, we don't do that. We let it fester and drag it around with us for years and years and years, chewing on it over and over and over again and feeling emotional about it, but never actually shifting it to get back into an emotional neutral state. This is information that is meant to empower you to, see that the accepted medical wisdom that we have is extremely limited, and it is being pushed by profit-making machines. If everyone felt this level of self-empowerment to look into their own emotional root causes and heal from within, there would be a lot less dependency and money going into the medical system. So this is not meant to be scary or triggering at all. This is meant to be empowering. It's difficult to talk about this in a general sense because everyone is so specific and unique in how they interpret the world and the emotional imbalances that they carry around. Someone being abandoned by a parent could perceive that in myriad different ways. Our triggers are the best way to know when we're out of balance. If you have something in your physical body that you are struggling to heal or to remedy or to understand why it just won't go away, it may be because you have not hit the emotional root cause on the head and pulled out the weed from the root. And there's no amount of physical medicine, therapy, antibiotics, surgery that will ever address the emotional root cause. You will just be slapping physical thing after physical thing, but never actually addressing the energy underneath. And that is why, people get plastic surgery after plastic surgery after plastic surgery, because it is coming from an imbalance. It is coming from an emotional imbalance of them not feeling good enough or attractive enough or whatever it is, not enough status, I don't know. And so they keep going back and back and back, but the energy underneath never changes. There is no amount of plastic surgery that can heal your self-image issue or your inadequacy issue. That has got to be shifted at the root level, at the emotional level. And the same goes for illness and disease. Yes, we can use the Western medical system to help us treat certain symptoms, but if we don't treat the underlying energy, it will never shift, and it will get louder and louder and louder, because our soul is screaming at us to say, hey, you are still carrying this around. You still have this limited concept of self, and you deserve better than that. And so your body starts talking to you to get your attention. And most people are going to wake up when it comes to their physical bodies. It's actually a brilliant, genius system. If you're willing to embrace it and to see the unconditional love and the balance in all of it, then you will be so, so, so grateful to your body for showing you where you are limiting yourself. Because ultimately, when we are unlimited and our emotions are balanced and our consciousness keeps getting elevated and elevated and elevated, that then is reflected back to us in our physical lives and our physical health. And we get to live our dream realities, but it always starts with the energetic first. So we need to address the energy underneath any physical ailment, symptom, disease, illness, before we can fully heal the physical manifestation of that energy underneath. So if you want support, guidance, mentorship, it would be my honor and privilege. If you want more information, head to my website. And just as a sidebar, I will say, this is why I'm so obsessed with emotional mastery. This is why I catch my emotions and rebalance them every time a difficult emotion pops up, because the impact that it has down the track for our physical lives is so immense. And also, it's just a fabulous way to live, because you always feel good when you're addressing your emotions. So, another plug for emotional mastery, but I'm here for you if you need any support or mentorship, or you're wanting to really get to the root cause of your imbalances and any difficulties you might be having in your life. As always, would be my honor. Okay, much love, much emotional mastery, and much healing vibes sending out to everyone this week. Thank you so much for being here today. If you want to keep hanging out, because I sure do, then head to my Instagram @PhoebesGram or my website, phoebestewart.com.